ERP implementations rarely fail because the software didn't work. Often they fail because of a data migration issue. That's what I want to talk about today. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For over 20 years, I've drafted and negotiated a variety of software-related agreements and litigated failed software projects in courts across the country. If you're involved in an ERP implementation, selection, or digital transformation, data migration is probably one of the biggest issues that is going to determine the success or failure of your project. And when most people think about ERP failures and ERP risks, they really think about software that doesn't work. They think about misrepresented functionality. They think about gaps in functionality, and they rarely think about data migration. And I think that is a mistake, because the fact of the matter is that if your data is wrong, if it's incomplete, or if it is not properly cleaned, all of the efficiencies and technological advantages with respect to efficient business processes and the like, you're just not going to be able to realize all of those without clean data. If you bungle the data migration process, you're going to flip the switch on go live, and you're going to be faced with operational disruption. You're not going to be able to ship products, send invoices out. The problems could potentially be endless. So it's incredibly important to get it done right. And I think there are a variety of risks that you need to be aware of. So let's talk about what actually goes wrong. I think the first issue that you want to think about is data quality, and this is the classic dirty data problem. Most organizations have data that's been accumulating in a legacy system for years, decades, and it's pretty unlikely that that data is going to be automatically compatible with the way that that new ERP system works. The second issue really is data loss and data corruption. When you're trying to do migration, you don't want to lose data. You certainly don't want to corrupt it. And I think you've got to take care that none of those things happen when you're dealing with a data migration. Third, you want to think about system incompatibility. The legacy system is not necessarily going to be compatible in the way that it processed data, the fields, the information that it relied upon with respect to certain processes that were in that system. You've got to understand how the new system operates, what kind of data it relies on, and you've got to make sure that the data that you're pulling from that old system is going to be compatible with the way the new system operates. You really can't underestimate the scope and effort required for data migration. Most companies that are going through a digital transformation or an ERP project, it's really more of an afterthought. And I think if you're going to do it that way, it really is going to become a problem. It needs to be at the forefront. You need to plan for it. You need to make sure that you've got the manpower devoted to data migration, and you need to treat it with the importance that it deserves. Staying on that same theme, one of the other risks that we will see is really weak testing and validation. I mean, you've got to go through that process. You want to make sure you've validated that the data works, that you've understood the migration process, that you've accounted for the differences between the legacy system and the new system. Next, you really want to think about downtime and disruption. There is going to be downtime, there is going to be disruption, there's going to be some sort of period of time when you switch over that you're still going to be learning things. There's going to be an investment that is going to need to be made into how you're going to deal with that disruption. And I think data migration disruption is fairly common and something that you need to account for. You want to think about security and compliance. You also want to have an understanding of ownership gaps and contractual obligations and contractual risks. You can't be in a scenario where no one is quite sure who is responsible for decisions, who's signing off on mappings. All of that has to be understood and ideally detailed with specificity in the contract. So how do you mitigate some of these risks? I think you want to start with an early data assessment. You want to use that assessment to define clear cleansing rules associated with any kind of dirty data or the data in general. You want to design your mapping before you build. It's not simply an IT artifact. I mean, business owners need to review and sign off on it. They're the ones who have to live with the results. So it just makes sense. You need to be ruthless about what you actually migrate. You want to bring over active, necessary, and legally required data. And if you can, archive the rest. You want to give business owners time, tools, and clear responsibilities to validate data. You don't want to have them just review screens. You want to make sure that your contracts and governance documents spell out who does what on data migration, how success is measured, and what happens if your data isn't where it needs to be. If you do all these things, you're not necessarily going to eliminate all risks, but I think you will drastically reduce the odds that your ERP implementation project turns into some huge legal firefight. If you have any questions about any of the information I've talked about in this video, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you and get you pointed in the right direction.